another edition to Reeves' Point of View. I want to talk to you about stop being afraid of technology being updated. And here's the thing. Most people, there's a phrase that we use, especially in the legal community, it's called being risk adverse, meaning it's a nice way of saying that a lot of people don't like to take risk. And there's another way to look at it as well. A lot of people don't like to make change. And it's not because they're not capable of adapting to change. It's just the fact that what happens is that we are creatures of habit and creatures of comfort. So when we get into a rhythm that works best for us, we tend to be resistant to change. Now, it's worse when the change is occurring outside of the scope of our control. Meaning, if you've got a lawnmower that works for you, that you just push, it's not self-propelled and you're not riding it, guess what? If that works for you, you're not going to upgrade it. If you've got, a washing machine or a dryer or dishwasher, some device in your place that has been doing what you wanted to do for the longest, it's reliable, it's dependable, and more importantly, it's predictable, you may not want to change. The trick comes when something has to change and you have no choice but to adapt. One of the things that the pandemic did during this time period is that it forced a lot of people to have to modify their behavior about how they do things. So they had to change even if they didn't want it. Think about the number of people who found themselves downloading and utilizing apps for the very first time without ever having to use it. How many people got introduced to Amazon for the first time? How many found out how many grocery stores and restaurants used apps for the first time? How many of you used Grubhub and DoorDash for the first time? How many of you used Uber Eats for the first time? All of these things were new things based on additional technologies that you may or may not have had access to or may not have been actively using. But how many of us were so wanting just to go back to the way things were, as opposed to recognizing that this was a part of the change that's not going anywhere? Once we got out of the pandemic about a good 2 years later, you figure the pandemic kicked in full gear in 2020 with the beginning remnants starting in 2019, and then you hearing countries officially saying that it was over in 2022. During that 2-year window, we were all globally conditioned to have to change. We had no choice. But there were a significant segment of our population that really wanted to go back. And so how many of you found yourself in this situation where as soon as the pandemic was over, you immediately went back to doing the things that you used to do? But here's the part you probably didn't realize. How many of you out there kept parts of that change to yourself, meaning you still use certain things? Like I had the running joke I told somebody, I said, I didn't realize McDonald's had an app until the pandemic. I didn't realize that Wendy's had an app until the pandemic. I didn't realize Taco Bell had an app. Note, I'm just saying restaurants, but even grocery stores. Target had an app, Walmart had, all these places had apps, and all of a sudden I found new ways to use it because guess what? They weren't letting us in a lot of these places en masse, so you had to find innovative ways to use this technology. So all of a sudden, you'll be surprised how many of you, I'm not saying those of you who went back to the way you used to do, I'm saying how many of you still held on to certain aspects of the change in technology from that time period. Really, be honest with yourself. And it doesn't have to be anything significant. It can be something small. Why am I saying that? Well, I'm saying is because regardless of whether you know it or not, you were put in a position where you had to change, you had to adapt, you had to adjust to the new technology in order for you to do things. And guess what? You rolled with it. The hard reality is, for a lot of people, that change, that technology was already there. We had just convinced ourselves that we didn't need it. And for some of us, we had convinced ourselves that we were resistant to it because we were afraid of the technology. I know this is not anything new, and I don't want to belittle you when I'm talking like this, but it's important for you to understand that every time some form of technology is rolled out, integrated into your life, whether it be because of your choice or some choice beyond your control, there's no need to be paranoid that it's going to be the end of the world. You don't need to be paranoid that it's going to eliminate all these different situations. You don't need to. You just know that you now have to adapt. You've been adapting for the longest. Trust me, when you didn't have a car, you were walking every way. You adapted until you got your car. And guess what? When you found you needed to fly and you were used to driving, you started to adapt to figure out how you can find your finances so you can fly instead of driving. We are creatures that are used to adapting to change. That's not a problem. So when new technology presents itself or pops itself out in such a way that you feel it's going to disrupt your world in ways you hadn't expected, stop being afraid, stop freaking out, and just roll with it. Because guess what? It's not going anywhere, and thankfully, neither are you. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Reeves' Point of View. I am Tony Reeves. As always, you can hit me up at anthonyreeves.com. And as always, I end this show with my favorite question of the day. Are you ready for the Anthony Reeves experience?